In this video, we're going to be going through some of the common money habits that can be keeping you poor. A recent survey found that less than 5% of UK adults were able to correctly answer 10 questions about common personal finance topics. And so with this lack of financial knowledge, it's not all that surprising that some of these mistakes are more common than you might imagine. Now, if I told you there was a evidence-based way to be able to double your earnings, you'd rip my arm off to know what it is. Which leads us on to our first point, which is only taking the raise. A survey a few years ago from Forbes found that people who stayed in their job for, on average, more than 2 years earn 50% less over their lifetime than those who moved approximately every 2 years. So the short answer is the easiest way to double your income over your lifetime is to move jobs more regularly. And this is backed up by more recent data. A research from the Pew Research Centre found that people who moved between jobs got an average increase of 10%. Those who decided to stay in the job they were in had an inflation-adjusted net loss of 2%. And so when it comes to negotiating your salary raises, this is something that you really need to be laser focused on. So this is just so important, and it is so often overlooked. People often spend all of their energy and time focusing on their expenses and not really having the same laser focus when it comes to their income. So what do we mean by that? Well, most people generally go through an annual pay review and they will get a small nominal increase in their salary, and the idea is to keep up with inflation. You're going back and you're saying, right, I think I should be getting paid this much more. This is why. And really starting to build that case. What you'll see on this graph here is when you're able to do that, it changes the income trajectory over the course of your working life. And this is especially problematic if you're not doing this earlier on in your career. Now, the next one, I cannot tell you how often I hear this one and how frustrating it is because it's so easy to solve, and that's relying on financial willpower. There was a recent survey that found that if you take a group of 20 people and you set them up with a financial goal, 1 in 20 of those people won't make it to the end of the day. About 1 in 5 won't even make it to the end of the week, and more than 1 in 4 will give up before the end of the month. And there's evidence outside of the finance world. There's this particular paper here, which basically found that people who scored more highly on self-control assessments basically had higher retirement accounts. But the problem invariably is that willpower is a finite resource. And so what can we do about this one? I think to some degree, the analogy here is it's like getting fit. You don't go to the gym that's 100 miles down the road. You go to the one that's just around the corner, because it's easier, because it's more convenient, and because there are fewer obstacles in your way in order to do what you have to do to achieve your goal. And so a much more effective strategy is to put automated systems in place that facilitate your longer term financial goals. When it comes to building wealth, time is your ally. Time is just the thing that will make all the difference. And so the next one is leaving it too late to invest. A recent survey found that 70% of retirees in the US wish that they'd saved more for retirement, or that they'd started saving for retirement sooner. And this is often cited as people's #1 money regret, and it's kind of easy to see why. And I suppose this is for two main reasons. The first is people want to have a bigger account balance when it comes to retirement. That's the obvious one. But I think the one which we really need to talk about is the effect of compound interest over time. So let's just, for the sake of argument, work through an example. Let's say you start investing at 30, you put £250 away every single month. We'll assume an average growth rate of 10%. That's often cited as the average rate of return of the S&P 500 over the last 120 or so years. And by the time you'll get to 65, you'll have about 813 grand in there, like a pretty hefty amount, no doubt. But if you started saving at age 40 instead, you'd only have 295,000. So missing out on delaying by just 10 years is wow, that is a big difference when it comes to the overall value in your pension pot. Avoiding financial education. Now, you're watching this channel, so kudos to you. You're taking steps in the right direction. This study just here, in fact, that basically found that the more highly people scored on financial education literacy tests, the better their overall financial outcomes were. It's always mad to me that just a very basic understanding and a very small amount of financial understanding and financial knowledge goes such a long way. Further evidence of this, there was this piece in the FT that found that 3/4 of people fell below the minimum standard for finance literacy. And it's actually kind of worse than that. People who don't necessarily have the level of financial literacy that they should do make worse decisions. So it's not just that they are flat, they are actively making worse decisions. And that's what I mean. Just small amounts of financial literacy and financial education, even if they just stopped you making bad decisions, that on its own is so valuable. So what can you do about this? First thing, subscribe to this fine channel where we cover all of these things in great detail. We generally put out 2 videos a week, so subscribe, and thanks very much in advance. If I told you that, in my view, there is a difference between a financial plan and a budget, what would you say the difference is? Because plenty of people have neither. So the next is not having a plan. A financial plan is basically how you are going to fund your retirement, irrespective of how old you are. And the Financial Planning Association came out with a study that found that people who have a financial plan in place are much more likely to retire more securely and with a much more stable income. And that's for a few reasons. So to me, a financial plan is, I want to retire at 60 with my house paid for, with a retirement income of this. That is a financial plan. That is the overarching strategy that you have for your finances. A budget is informed by your financial plan. So I need to be putting this much into my ISAs for my kids, I need to be putting this much into my pension. So think of it as financial plan macro, budget micro. But one thing I think we should point out at this stage, that a financial plan is not tattooed onto you, it's not carved in stone or anything crazy like that. It's perfectly reasonable for it to change, focusing only on expenses. Now, this is maybe the most annoying one. So as we mentioned earlier, there is a potentially unlimited upside to focusing on your income. But when it comes to reducing your expenses, there are, I guess, three main problems. The first is that you can only tighten your expenses so much. There's only so much you can realistically start to lower your cost base to a point where it makes sense. There are so many other things that you could do before you get all the way down to coffee. So just enjoy your coffee in peace is what I'm getting at. Now, we should also be very clear at this point. As part of this solution, this is not to say you should never analyse your expenses. Obviously not. That's insane. You should find a budget method that works for you. You don't have to understand where every single penny is going for a budget to be effective, relying on a single source of income. A survey in 2023 found that 62% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And so for me, having multiple income sources has three key advantages. The first thing is it protects you. It's that nice soft landing, that safety net in the case of a job loss or a big and unexpected bill. The second thing is it accelerates you towards your financial goals. If you're making 50k a year from your main salary and then you're making another 5 or 10k a year from your side hustle, that's a pretty significant percentage uplift and it will get you to your financial goals that much faster. And the third thing is it reduces your overall anxiety about kind of some of the economic uncertainty. Maybe job cuts are being made at your place of work and you're a bit worried that your job might be next, and just knowing that you've got something to fall back on. It might not be up to the full value of your current job, but you know, it's something that you've got coming in. The next thing is paying yourself last. This is a pretty simple concept. Most people will get paid their salary, they will spend their money on whatever, and then they will save and invest what's left. That is an insane way of doing this. So what do? You flip all this on its head. So you get paid, you put some money aside for your saving and investing, and you just treat it like any other bill. You treat it like your mortgage, your rent, your grocery bills, and then you spend what's left. And one of the key things that we talk about a lot on this channel is that invariably, because you want to spend money on going out with your friends, going to the movies, going out to dinner, you find all the things which I admonish people for talking about, cutting back on coffees and so on. You find all those like just little shortcuts which can make a difference to you, and it's because you want to spend money on this pile. You want to spend money on the going out stuff because it's the most fun stuff. So like, why wouldn't you? So just making sure that you're treating your saving and investing as a bill is key. Now, one of the solutions that we've talked about a lot in previous videos is including it in your budget, and that can be really the easiest way to incorporate this. So what are some of the budgets? Well, the classic one is the 50-30-20. That's 50% on your needs, 30% on your wants, and 20% on your saving and investing. I think it's a really good budget. The position of me on this channel is a budget should offer you some degree of structure, but it shouldn't be a straitjacket. If you have a budget that is too restricting, the evidence says that for the most part, people will just fall off the wagon. Now, attached to this is the 80-20 budget. This basically just says, as long as you are saving and investing 20% of your after-tax income, it doesn't matter what you spend the rest on. You know, I can't actually fault this one, really. You've already saved and invested for your future. And I think just one misconception about this is lots of people assume that having to, you know, make that 20% every single month is restricting. I actually think it's the opposite, and people are looking at it from the wrong perspective. I think actually being able to go out on a Friday, Saturday night or whatever, being able to spend your money on the things you want to spend your money on, already knowing that you've taken care of securing your financial future, I think is actually more liberating. At this stage, there's also plenty of evidence that having a budget can reduce stress. A study in 2018 found that people who had a budget were more likely to have an emergency fund to cover unexpected bills. A survey in 2016 found that people who had a budget generally had a higher net worth than people who didn't. A survey in 2017 found that people who had a budget had a higher credit score, on average 20 points higher. Picking a budget that works for you is one of the most important things that you can be doing. Thanks very much for watching. Peace.